Story 1. The Forgotten Call. David was exhausted. As a dedicated businessman in Chicago, his days were filled with endless meetings, emails, and phone calls. Despite the long hours, he always made time for his mother, Margaret, who lived alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Ever since his father passed away 5 years ago, David had promised himself that he would never let his mother feel lonely. He made it a habit to call her every Sunday evening, no matter how busy he was. It wasn't much, but it reassured him that she was okay. But last Sunday he had forgotten. He had been caught up in work, preparing for a crucial meeting, handling last-minute reports, and by the time he looked at the clock, it was past midnight. "I'll call her first thing in the morning," he told himself. But morning turned into afternoon, then into the next day, and then an entire week had passed. It was Sunday again when David finally remembered. Guilt gnawed at him as he picked up his phone and dialed her number. The phone rang twice before his mother answered. "Hello?" "Hey, Mom," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "How are you?" There was a pause before she responded. "I'm okay, David. How are you?" He noticed something different in her voice. It wasn't her usual warmth. It was distant. "I'm good," he said, forcing a chuckle. "I'm sorry I didn't call last week. Things have been crazy at work." Another pause. Then she let out a small sigh. "I know, sweetheart. You're busy. I understand." David frowned. "Mom, are you sure everything's okay?" A moment passed before she spoke again. "I waited for your call last Sunday. I thought maybe you were just running late. I kept my phone close, thinking it would ring any minute, but it never did." David felt a lump in his throat. "Mom, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to." She cut him off gently. "It's not about the call, David. It's about knowing someone is thinking of me." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had been so caught up in his life that he hadn't realized how much that simple weekly call meant to her. David took a deep breath. "Mom, I promise you, I won't forget again." She chuckled softly. "I know you won't." From that day on, David not only called every Sunday, he also made surprise visits, brought her dinner, and made sure she never felt forgotten again. Because sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. Story 2. A Father's Responsibility. It had been a hectic morning for James. His 2 daughters, Lily and Emma, were running late for school, and he barely had time to grab a coffee before rushing them out the door. Ever since his divorce from their mother, Sarah, he had taken pride in being a responsible co-parent. Despite their differences, he and Sarah had worked out a schedule where they took turns picking up and dropping off the girls at school. But lately, something had been bothering him. Sarah had introduced a new boyfriend, Sean, into the girls' lives. It had only been 4 months since she started dating him, yet Sean had already moved in with them. James wasn't thrilled about this sudden change, but he kept his opinions to himself for the sake of maintaining peace. One afternoon, Sarah called him unexpectedly. "Hey, James, I need to ask you something important," she said. "What's up?" he replied, leaning against his kitchen counter. "I need your approval to add Sean to the girls' school emergency contact list." James nearly choked on his drink. "Wait, what? Why would I do that?" Sarah sighed, as if she had expected resistance. "James, I just started a new job, and my hours are unpredictable. If something happens at school and I can't get there, Sean can pick them up." James felt his jaw tighten. "Sarah, he's been around for 4 months. 4. That's hardly enough time to trust him with our daughters in an emergency." "He's living with them, James," she argued. "He takes care of them, helps with homework. He's part of their lives now. Plus, he just got a new car, so it makes sense." James frowned. "What does a new car have to do with it?" "Well, he can pick them up if they need a ride," she said impatiently. James rubbed his temples. "Sarah, if there's an emergency, I'll leave work and get them myself. Or you can call my parents or even a close family friend. But I'm not putting a man you've known for a few months in charge of our kids' safety." Sarah's tone sharpened. "You're being unreasonable. You're acting like I'm putting them in danger." James took a deep breath. "I'm being cautious. I don't know him, Sarah, and neither do the girls, really. I'm not comfortable with this, and I don't think any responsible father would be." Sarah huffed. "You just don't like him. Admit it." "This isn't about me," James said firmly. "This is about what's best for Lily and Emma." The argument ended with Sarah calling him uncooperative and jealous. Then, to make things worse, her mother called him later, insisting he stop being difficult. "James, you need to trust Sarah's judgment," his ex-mother-in-law scolded. "Sean is going to be their stepfather one day. Why are you making things so hard?" James exhaled, keeping his voice calm. "Because my daughter's safety is my priority, not making life easier for Sarah's boyfriend." Over the next few days, he heard from other family members, all of whom pressured him to reconsider. But James refused to back down. He had seen too many stories about step-parents being introduced too soon, and he wasn't willing to take that risk. Instead, he met with the girls' school principal and updated their emergency contacts, making sure that in any situation he would be the first to be called. Sarah wasn't happy, but James didn't care. He wasn't trying to make a point. He was trying to be a good father, and in his heart, he knew he had made the right decision. Here's the detailed version of the first story, about the stepmom trying to kick the girl out of her own house. Story 3. A home of my own. I grew up in my grandparents' house just outside the city, on a quiet stretch of land where the trees swayed gently in the wind. My mom had passed away from cancer when I was just 11. My dad worked out of town, so I stayed with my grandparents. It wasn't the life I imagined, but it was a good one. My dad was always there when he could be, and when he was home, we made the best of our time together. As the years passed, my grandparents grew older. First, my grandma passed, then my grandpa a year later. I had always been their only grandchild, so when their will was read, the house, the land, and my grandpa's old truck were left to me. My dad had never paid rent because my grandparents wanted him to save money for our future. And after my mom died, the life insurance had helped renovate the house, making it even more of a home. Then my dad met Tabitha, Tabby for short. She was young, stylish, and had 2 little kids from a previous relationship. She was the first woman my dad had ever brought home, and after a long conversation, he asked if she and the kids could move in. "It's a big house," he had reasoned. "You'll still have your space." I was hesitant, but agreed. I didn't mind the kids. They were just 5 and 7. Innocent in all of this. But Tabby? She was different. At first, she was sweet, making an effort to be friendly. But soon, her comments turned passive-aggressive. "This place is so big, I bet it's hard to keep up with by yourself. You're young. You should be out in the city, having fun, not stuck here. It must be lonely living in a house that wasn't really meant for just one person." Then, one day, she stopped hinting and started demanding. "When are you moving out?" she asked, arms crossed, standing in my doorway. I blinked at her. "What?" "Well, the baby's coming soon," she said, patting her barely there bump. "We need this room. Plus, my mom is coming to help out, and she needs a place to stay, too." I stared at her, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "This is my house, Tabby." She rolled her eyes. "It was your grandparents' house, sweetie. They wouldn't want you hoarding all this space when a growing family needs it." I was shaking by the time my dad came home that weekend. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the trees. "Dad," I said carefully, "Tabby wants me to move out." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know, kiddo. She mentioned it." "And what did you say?" He was silent. Anger bubbled up inside me. "Dad, this is my house. Not yours, not hers. Mine." "I know," he admitted. "But she's pregnant. She needs help. We were thinking, maybe you could move into the city for a while? She offered you her old apartment at a discount." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so she wants me out, but at a price?" He winced. "I just want things to be smooth, kiddo. You could focus on school." "No." His head snapped up. "I'm not moving," I said firmly. "If you want a bigger place, you have options. You have savings. She has an apartment she could sell for a down payment. If she's planning a future with you, she should be willing to invest in it." "She doesn't want to sell," he muttered. "The market." "I don't care about the market," I interrupted. "She's trying to push me out of my own home while keeping her investment safe. That's not fair." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Dad," I softened my voice, "but I refuse to be treated like a guest in my own house." That night I locked my bedroom door, feeling both relieved and exhausted. I had stood my ground. The next morning, Tabby wouldn't meet my eyes at breakfast. Her usual snide comments were gone. My dad looked like he had aged overnight, but I didn't regret my decision. I wasn't leaving, and if they wanted a home without me in it, they could find one on their own. Story 4. The father who took credit for his daughter's art. Emma had always been passionate about art. Ever since she was a little girl, she loved drawing, painting, and experimenting with colors. She dreamed of becoming an artist one day. Her mother, who had always encouraged her creativity, found a local art class for her when she was in elementary school. It was taught by a kind woman named Mrs. Annie, and Emma loved attending every Saturday. Emma's parents were divorced, and she lived primarily with her mom, only visiting her dad every other weekend. One day she asked her father if she could still attend her art classes when she was at his house. She expected him to say yes, but instead he told her that if she wanted to go during his weekends, she would have to pay for the lessons herself. Not only that, but he also demanded that she give him $5 each time to compensate for the TV shows he would miss while driving her to class. As a 9-year-old, Emma didn't fully understand why her father was making her pay. She adored her art class, so she saved up her allowance and birthday money just to afford a few extra lessons. Eventually, she ran out of money and had to stop going on his weekends, which made her sad. When her mom found out what was happening, she was furious. From that moment on, Emma's mom made sure she got to attend her classes without having to pay her father. Years passed, and Emma never forgot how her father had treated her passion. She still loved art and took online classes whenever she could. One evening, her father hosted a work party at his house, and she joined for dinner. After eating, she excused herself to work on a school project, but later one of his co-workers approached her in the kitchen. "You know, you should be more grateful to your father," the man said. "He worked hard to support you and even paid for all your expensive art lessons." Emma was shocked. She had never told anyone about her dad making her pay for her own classes, but here was this stranger giving her a lecture based on lies. Without thinking, she blurted out the truth. "My dad never paid for my art lessons. He actually made me pay him to drive me there, even when I was a little kid." The co-worker looked surprised and awkwardly apologized before walking away. Emma didn't think much of it until her father confronted her a few days later. Apparently, the co-worker had spread the story at work, and now her dad was a laughingstock. His colleagues joked about how he had charged his own daughter money as if she were a tenant renting a room. Emma's father was furious. He accused her of ruining his reputation and embarrassing him in front of his co-workers. His mother, Emma's grandmother, and his girlfriend also sided with him, saying she was ungrateful. But Emma didn't feel guilty. She hadn't lied. She had simply told the truth. If her father didn't want to be embarrassed, he shouldn't have taken credit for something he never did. Story 5. The Divorced Sister-in-Law. Asking for money. Sarah had never been close to her younger brother Jake. They were just too different. Sarah worked a steady blue-collar job, was happily married, and had a toddler. Jake, on the other hand, was always jumping from one business idea to the next, never sticking to anything for long. When Jake was 23, he got married to a woman named Lisa. At the time, Sarah barely knew Lisa and didn't care much about the wedding. Years passed, and she only saw Lisa at family events. They were never friends, and Lisa always seemed more interested in talking about herself than getting to know Sarah. Then, one day, Sarah's parents told her that Jake and Lisa were divorcing. Sarah shrugged. It wasn't a surprise. But what did surprise her was the phone call she got a few days later. Lisa was on the other end, and she sounded desperate. "I really need your help, Sarah," Lisa said. "Jake ruined my life, and now I have no money. Can you lend me something to get by?" Sarah was stunned. They had never been close, so why was Lisa suddenly asking for money? "I'm sorry to hear that," Sarah replied carefully. "But I can't give you money. I have my own family to take care of." Lisa wasn't ready to give up. "But you're a woman. You should support other women. Jake left me in this mess, and your family owes me. I need help with childcare, too. Can't you at least watch the kids?" Sarah was even more confused. Lisa had never acted like they were family before, and now she was demanding help. "Look," Sarah said firmly, "I'll always be there for my niece and nephews, but I'm not responsible for supporting you. If Jake isn't paying what he owes, take him to court, but I can't step in and fix this for you." Lisa exploded. She ranted about how unfair life was, how Sarah should feel obligated to help, and how their family was full of selfish people. At that point, Sarah was done. "I'm sorry you're struggling, but you need to figure this out on your own. Please don't contact me about money again." After that, Lisa tried to guilt-trip the rest of the family, but no one else caved either. She was furious, but Sarah didn't regret her decision. Helping her niece and nephews was one thing, but giving money to someone she barely knew just because they shared a last name once? Absolutely not.